So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the holy cities of the Hamashiach laid waste from many centuries. Reading from Yeshayahu the prophet is always important, making a reference point of this great person that was absolutely dedicated for the work of the eternal. And regarding the situations of the time of the end, as this prophet was always pointing many situations regarding the autumn feast and also the rehearsals of the holy instructions regarding the Vaikra, the 23rd chapter, there are some very important developments in the world indicating the Chinese system is truly coming. So as it was said then many times before, the Chinese system is coming, the Chinese system is coming, and the Chinese system is coming. And it was not even a couple of years ago that the IPO was then given as the Alibaba, a great company, internet company, online company, obviously growing by leaps and bounds, is making many kinds of movements as far as the development of the internet trade. Now, not only this, but where are the scripture references of these great prophets and what they are explaining as far as the completion of the autumn feast? Very importantly, before this information is given, reading from the prophet, Yeshayahu the prophet, and lining up these situations regarding the time of the end and the restoration period, where then very simply Yeshayahu is given a few understandings from the Gentiles' end of time, and then the trade during the time of the restoration. As it was said before many times, the restoration is not only given for the purposes of tabernacling, but also for the trade and the military. So then the prophet is very clear regarding then the ships and the system. And Daniel the prophet, in chapter number 11, explains very simply a line of understanding from prophecy and prophecy, reinforcing the line of trade and the situations of these systems. Now then, many countries are lining up with a system that is not from the West, in fact, from the East. So the BRICS obviously is the new trade system that the scripture is very clearly stating. Now then, it's very hard for people of the West trying to understand manuscripts that were recorded in a culture where most of these people from the West have no idea on how to read it. But a few clues can be given. So then our quest for the truth and also the events of the end can be then easily reconstructed. Now then, as far as Yeshayahu the 23rd chapter explains very, very, very clear, who has purposed these against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are rulers, whose traders are honored of the earth? Then Yodhevavehi of hosts has purposed it to stain the pride of these people and to bring to contempt this honor. Now, simply these kinds of scripture is always related with the character of the nations, because they are obviously stealing, they are destroying the companies and also the many economies of the world. And the West is going through a lot as far as what this weakening system recorded in Daniel chapter number 11. Now then, as far as what Daniel is explaining, many of these prophets at that time, they did not have the entire information as far as how these plans and these dynamics would involve many countries and many nations. However, a few of these understandings, such as the American money and the petroleum deal they made with Arabs in the 70s, obviously is coming to an end. Now, the Chinese very wisely has launched many kinds of plans through the BRICS, and this information is very easily obtained by reading. And some of this information regarding what's going on can be easily obtained and traced from what then the prophet is explaining. Now then, as far as the American money and the deal made with the Arabs, the USD, petro USD, we then understand what Daniel was explaining as far as the weakening of this system. Not only the Chinese system is coming via then the virtual monetary systems, where then nations, they cannot charge taxes except China. We find then that the nations are absolutely lost regarding what is coming and the adaptation of these new decentralized monetary systems. And not only this, but China then is covering many areas of trade, security, and has come out with the petro yuan. So then the Chinese money, as it is recognized by the International Monetary Fund, the nations, they simply want to get rid of the USD because it is a type of a system that is obsolete and very weakened. So then, what is China is doing? As then the Arabs have lowered the price of the oil some couple of years ago, we find then that the deal that the Arabs made with the Chinese simply is rewriting the type of trade that the world must go through. Now then, what is the viewpoint of the prophet as far as these traders that they deceived the countries for so long? Why are these people then so much involved with the situations that simply do not produce any benefit? Daniel the prophet explained many kinds of prophecies related with the time of the end and the restoration period. However, what is required for the moment are then simple understandings of the scripture in its original form. Understandably, these countries that are involved, not only these countries of the West are ruined and also bankrupt, we find in China and also the Soviet Union taking on distinct lines of understanding and also activity. As China is focusing on trade, so as the Soviet Union is focusing on the military. Now, there are some very strong indications of Iran, also Turkey, and also the Soviet Union having an international conference on Syria, already showing the power of the Soviets. And during this portion of time, there is also the BRICS New Development Bank, including infrastructure projects of a half times 12 digits, nearly. So this is very important because this situation is going to take place not only combined with the oil from the Arabs, where then the control of the price of oil is being gathered with what China is producing in forming packages, where then these nations, they are not developed, having then a chance of having the materials, not particularly the money, but the materials so they can develop and becoming part of a China belt system, or then the reconstructing of the Silk Road, extremely important for this time of the restoration period. Now the only problem that the nations of the weakening system are facing is they simply do not have any clue on how to tackle the problem. And this truly is a shame, because the prophet already said very clearly regarding this particular point. So then, China very wisely is linking up many banking systems with Chinese bank. Now then, as nations are ignorantly going through the motions, China is very wisely working the system around the world. There are many kinds of equipment being launched in space, and a lot of this equipment is related with the internet signal of the trade of the time of the end. So then, as far as what they are doing and the understanding of these situations, how are these nations during this time of the restoration period are going to develop a system of taxation from where then the freighters are going to be the most important provider. The situation is what kind of salvation each person should bear in mind. If you think your divinity, or then the type of divinity you worship, or you having some sort of gathering with, this divinity of yours can understand the time of the end and how then the world is going to end. Very principally, understanding Hebrew is extremely important, because the world does not understand the prophecies. As then the true divine nature has already explained, step-by-step formation of these particular understandings, what are the nations participating in weakened system of the West are going to do as far as charging taxes from non-centralized monetary systems. So then, as far as Daniel, the instructions are very clear as far as the restoration and the nations and the dynamics thereof. Not only understanding the trade, but understanding the military involvement of the Soviet Union, as later on they must come with great army and much equipment. So from the time of Daniel until the time of the end, the very angelic being that was speaking with Daniel knew that he had closed those prophecies until the time of the end, because many kinds of developments had obviously a great impact of these instructions later on being explained. So then, the news are very clear. BRICS Development Bank giving more funding for their purposes, led by China, And the countries of Brazil, Soviet Union, and then China, and then India and South Africa, these are the main countries who are involved in this new system, where then they themselves decided of having a socialist system linked up with this new monetary value of many kinds of international virtual systems. Now then, China not only controls more than half of the world's production, but they have made a deal with the Arabs, or the sons of Ishmael. So then the other nations, they won't have any choice as far as what the future brings. So then this truly shows the absolutely weakening of the Western system, and there is not in line any kind of recuperation of this system. Next year there shall be elections in the Congo, where then the most prominent, the Soviets, they are very near the area. If US they don't take action, then it's going to be very hard for the economy of US to recuperate in terms of stabilization. So there are portions of these instructions given as far as the weakening of this system, and then later on its refurbishment for the purposes of maintenance but not prosperity. At this point in time, not even prosperity we have an understanding of the stabilization of the US system. So then, the Soviet Union is then taking on the responsibility of leading many nations, troubled nations, on behalf of the Chinese system, and then obviously those roots that are taking place as far as the line of one belt system, these countries must line up with China and its railroad, shipping lines, and also, most importantly, linking up the systems of each nation with the Bank of China. As the production of computers became much more popular, nobody would ever imagine that what it was said before, that each person in the earth would have a computer at home. And during these days, after many decades of technology, the situation truly has changed. So then, not only this, but then the plan of China is obviously using the computer for the new trade system, where then many people around the world will have banking with the Chinese bank. Until we find then these countries talking, these countries having very strong dynamics. And then the president of Syria has obviously conversed with the president of the Soviet Union, and these should bring a great calm in the region, because the Soviet Union shall and must show a very strong presence in northern portions of where they are dealing with. Most principally Syria, Libya, and those regions, they are having many troubles. By the instructions and per the instructions, we find in the prophets giving great understandings of stabilization in these very troublesome countries. So the best way of taking care of this is simply reading these understandings. So then, after these, each person then can compare with what then the prophet is explaining. Now, understandably, the Paleo-Hebrew and the Ancient Hebrew are the best script that we should ever use so we can understand these prophecies. Now then, what's going on with Egypt? What's going on with the forces of ISIL? Where then, very clearly, the Soviet Union must get involved not only in Syria, but also in the countries where ISIL is operating. As far as Turkey, many kinds of information are coming up, most principally because they want to build a nuclear power plant. And these truly links up with other systems that the prophets explain very clearly regarding then the flow of events until the restoration period is prepared for the time of the end. So the Eternal is always working situations and circumstances and dynamics that the prophets explained many centuries ago. So then those people who have no clue, those people who are not studying, yet they are trusting that some sort of a divine person is taking care of, they are absolutely sadly mistaken. Because the divine has already given each of these situations plainly given on paper, so then each person who are being responsible can obviously understand and relate with the time of the end and the restoration period. So then if a person that does not believe asks, what are the situations regarding the time of the end and what you perceive from your divine perspective, then you would have an answer promptly given. More coming up, so please stay tuned.